And I want to thank Andrea for the invitation to participate in this, Jillian, who's behind the camera organizing, and it's been a great pleasure spending some time with Benita and with Greg. Actually, we were having too much fun here, so we better, get serious for a little bit. So I'm talking about 3 myths, 2 of them more probably general myths, and the third dealing specifically with kind of the Manitoba election. And hopefully the first 2 kind of set up my reasoning in the third. So, first myth is kind of that Aboriginal communities, northern Aboriginal communities, particularly remote, isolated northern Aboriginal communities, are just the sum of a whole bunch of problems. What we could call the pathologization of Aboriginal communities. That, they have terrible rates of this, terrible rates of that, all of that kind of thing that I don't need to repeat, kind of the morbid line of statistics. And I think if that's how you approach communities from a social or from a political angle, that's what you're going to see and that's what you're going to get out of it. So that, and I don't have a lot of time, but I'll say simply that all of those communities also have strengths. And that if you were to approach them from their strengths, you would see a very different kind of community, you'd have a very different experience in your working there, and you'd find different things in these communities well worth spending time with. One of the things that I'd like to comment upon is how in Manitoba, many of the senior bureaucrats, government people, industry people, it's almost as if when they're going to a small community, their sole purpose is to make sure they don't get caught overnight there. So they leave as quickly as possible. They go in, they go out. They make sure there's a plane that takes people out as quickly as they can. And the same people will go from Winnipeg, they'll travel all the way to Bangkok in Thailand, they'll go up to Chiang Mai, they'll pay to go into the hill tribes and have an authentic cultural experience. They'll pay thousands of dollars for an authentic cultural experience in Thailand. They could just as easily get one, in northern Manitoba. So what I'd call the pathologization of Aboriginal communities doesn't help us understand the communities, doesn't help on any level us get to grips with the things that need to be done, which certainly one simple thing is in any kind of community development, work from the strengths rather than from the perception of weaknesses. And I think that goes for politics and in any area. The second thing is, and I hear this all the time, it's almost like a mantra. You can't go back, people would say. Whenever I talk to people, I'm talking about maybe how things may have been not so bad in the old days, and there were some very good things about the way Aboriginal people governed themselves and lived in relationship to the environment and all that. I always get this, well, you can't go back. Well, you can't go back. And so for me, I think about it in a certain sense, we can't go forward the way we're going. In a world of limited resources, you cannot have unlimited accumulation. So in fact, sooner or later, unlimited accumulation and limited resources, and it may be happening in our generation, are going to encounter each other. We can't actually continue the world the way it is. And so we're going to have to start thinking about going back, de-escalating, finding an economy that doesn't depend upon growth. And so it may be that, people think of progress as like a train. And there's one thinker, Walter Benjamin, who says, maybe real progress is when humanity grabs the emergency brake. And so I think when humanity grabs the emergency brake, suddenly we're going to look at the elders, we're going to look at people who know how to live a more sustainable land-based way of life, and we're going to say, maybe those are the people who should be teaching us. So they say you can't go back. It may be that we have to go back. We have to look back. We have to look at the things that people have known that are being forgotten. Those are 2 very broad things I want to say about sort of thinking about politics and economy in Indigenous communities. And then the third thing is to do with one of the main election issues in the current provincial election, has to do with the Bipole 3 issue, where Manitoba Hydro will build its bipole from the new generating station they're building on the Nelson River towards Tatasqueyak. And of course, the most direct route to the south is through the along the east side of Lake Winnipeg. They're spending some extra money, considerable amounts, though there's debates about how much, to build a transmission line down around the west side. And I would argue that I actually don't think the west side road, if we take the long view, is going to cost more. I think ultimately it will cost less. And what's happening with the series of Indigenous communities on the east side, they have a World Heritage Site proposal that will maintain the territory as a hunting territory and an Aboriginal cultural territory for a long, long time to come. And you don't build a nuclear reactor right next to the Leaning Tower of Pisa or whatever World Heritage Sites. We say it's a World Heritage Site, that means it's protected. So you protect it or you don't protect it. People say, well, we can build the bipole and still have the World Heritage Site. It's like, yeah, we'll have a World Heritage Site as long as it doesn't inconvenience us. If it's World Heritage, then we as Manitobans have to treat it like World Heritage, and that means respect it. And I think over the long term, that will be much more valuable to the whole of the province and the whole of the world than the costs of building a flagpole down the west side. Leaving aside the whole issue of whether we should be building more dams in order to export power or not, and participate in this whole unlimited accumulation in the finite world process. Whole other set of questions related to that, but that's probably close to 10 minutes, and that sounds like 3 minutes, and that's what you're going to get out of me. So thank you.